Hi, welcome back. I'm so glad you're here. This week we're going to be learning about a character in the Bible named David. Maybe you've heard about David before, but this week we're going to talk a little bit more about how David got to be king when Saul was asked to step down from his leadership. David was the youngest of 8 brothers, so we can assume that he might have been small and not very strong. David's job was a shepherd, so he kept sheep all day. He probably didn't smell very good because his best friends and his close company were livestock and animals. So David's town and David's family didn't really think a lot about David. They didn't think, oh wow, David's this awesome, strong guy or this really important figure in our community. David had a regular job and a regular life, and really David was just kind of boring. When David was just a teenager, so only a few years older than you, there was a battle going on between the Philistines and the Israelites. The Philistines were Israel's neighbors, and they were always looking to start a war with Israel because they felt that the land that God gave them was actually theirs. So our story picks up on the battlefield. And if you picture this, it's like this large area, and you have the Philistines here and the Israelites here, and there's a valley in between them. And they have their camp set up, and they're each on both sides, separated. And for 40 days and 40 nights, this large man named Goliath, the Bible tells us he's probably 9 feet and 9 inches tall. His armor is 125 pounds, so we can assume he's probably really strong, would come out with a big spear in his hand and would yell to the Israelites, "Give me someone to fight. What are you waiting for?" So I'm kind of with the Israelites. They're super afraid. The Bible says greatly afraid. So we're going to pick up our story reading about what happens next. 3 of David's brothers were old enough to be fighting in this battle. And when their dad, Jesse, hears about Goliath, he panics and he says, "David, go check on your brothers. Leave your sheep and go now right to where the battle is, and then come back and tell me if your brothers are okay." So David goes right into the battle with Saul. And when he's walking into their camp, he hears Goliath. "What are you waiting for? Send someone to fight me." And David thinks to himself and then asks the army, "Who's going to fight him? Are we going to send anybody?" And the army is like, "Do you see this guy? He's humongous. None of us are going. He'll kill us. We'll die. We can't do it." And David says, "Then I'll go." And remember, I mentioned earlier in the story, David's the youngest of all of his brothers. So he's not big and he's not strong and he's not intimidating. But he has something else on his side, and it's faithfulness in God. So when the army hears about this, they run to King Saul and they say, "King Saul, David thinks he's going to fight Goliath. You have to go tell him that he can't do it." So King Saul goes to David and he says, "David, you're too small. You're not strong enough. There's no way you'll win against Goliath. You'll never go out there. We can't let you." And David says, "I'm going. You can't stop me." So Saul is willing to let David try because he's not a very nice guy like we talked about last week. So he puts David in all this armor and suits him up, and he's ready to go fight Goliath. But David can't even walk. He's so small. His helmet is weighing his head down, and he's wearing all this strong armor, and he just feels silly. And because he has faith in God, he takes it all off. So that probably sounds pretty crazy. And then on top of that, David doesn't even take a spear or a sword into battle. David finds a stream, and he finds little stones that we would call pebbles. They're flat and smooth, and he puts them in his bag. He gets 5 of them, and he goes back to fight Goliath with stones and a slingshot. That probably sounds pretty silly because this huge man could just stomp on David and kill him, but David is confident in God, and that's something we want to remember. So David heads to the front line of battle with his stones. Everyone in Israel's camp is watching him, probably like, "We're never going to see this guy again. You know, he's probably not going to make it." And Goliath sees David and he laughs. And we're going to pick up our story as David walks straight into battle with Goliath, full of faith, trusting God, and knowing that God's going to provide victory for him. We're going to be in 1 Samuel 17, verses 48 through 51. When the Philistine arose and came and drew near to meet David, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet the Philistine. And David put his hand in a bag and took out a stone and slung it and struck the Philistine on his forehead. The stone sank into his forehead and he fell on his face to the ground. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone and struck the Philistine and killed him. There was no sword in the hand of David. David had done it. He had defeated the Philistines, even when the Israelites didn't have faith in him. Even when King Saul, his leader that he probably looked up to, didn't believe he could do it. But David trusted God. And really, that's the most important part of the story, is that if we have faith in our hearts, God will use us, even if we're the least expected. And through that, we will see victory. Here are some things to remember this week. God can see inside of our hearts. And God cares more about what's on the inside than what's on the outside. And really, that's more important. We can also encourage ourselves in the Lord whenever we're feeling sad or discouraged. And the last thing is that God is sovereign in every circumstance. This means that no matter what comes against God, He will always prevail in victory over it.